contributor is Cecilia Alvarez, who works for Facebook. She's the Privacy Policy Director for Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. I think maybe based in Madrid. I wouldn't bank on it, but you are.
I am.
Hola. And
Hola.
So I think we're going to approach this in the same way, rather than ask Cecilia to make a presentation because the territory is so large. I'm going to ask Cecilia a couple of questions to get things moving along. And I guess the first and most obvious question is, everybody imagines that Facebook knows what color socks I'm wearing, what I had for breakfast, how I voted, or are likely to vote. So from the outside, people might ask, isn't it easy for platforms to verify age or have a very good knowledge of their client's age or their customer's age? So why do you think it's such a difficult nut to crack?
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, John, and thank you for EUCONSENT for having me today. So I will try to answer. I think that verifying someone's age is not that simple as it might sound, and we have seen this, I think, in the contribution of all the other speakers. I think it is generally acknowledged by governments, by regulators, and also, as we have seen, by researchers at the global level, that age verification is a multifaceted issue for which at present it seems that there is not at least one single agreed solution, which in itself speaks to inherent challenges that are involved. These complexities and difficulties have been particularly spot on in certain by certain regulators in Europe, European Union and the UK, and they recognize that it is unlikely to be a one-size-fits-all solution for all the issue of age verification in all contexts. If I may borrow one expression that you just used, John, context is everything, and in this area, of course, as well. If I may recap briefly on just some of the challenges that we, and I would say that also previous speakers have identified, maybe I can classify them into three kind of buckets. One is that we have different equities at play that need to be balanced. We need to be able to establish how to achieve sufficient accuracy to verify age, but at the same time, without excluding millions of individuals who could be unable to prove their age, or without inappropriately limiting children's digital rights. And this is something that has not yet been solved across industries or by regulators' proposals. Another element that needs to be taken into account with respect to the analysis or the identification of the various equities at play is that we have key human rights that must be upheld when determining age assurance mechanisms, and namely proportionality, which under the GDPR terminology has been, I think, with a name that could be misleading with this data minimization, but is proportionality, the principle that is behind. And this is something that ends up in my second bucket. That is, it's important to identify the equities at play in the relevant context, and then we need to assess them. And we need to have this kind of risk-based approach that I think many of the speakers have also been naming it. The strictest level probably for age verification should be reserved for areas that are posing the greatest risk. I think that when we have seen the two very extreme examples that Professor Livingston was using between checking the weather and pornography, we can see definitely the difference that we have with respect to the risk, and therefore also the difference that we should apply when assessing which kind of age verification mechanism or mechanisms with an S we should maybe be able to apply in the context at hand. The third bucket would be also another element that Revealing Reality was also pointing out. That is also the natural behavior of human beings, in this case, the young people and their parents, who can or often do either that they bypass the age assurances the organization may have been putting in place. Some of them could be easier to circumvent than others, but it is so that it seems there is a natural behavior sometimes to misrepresent the age when this is a kind of age assurance that is in place, or to implement, I think workarounds was the word that was used, but definitely we have seen, and not only in my professional capacity, but in my personal capacity, I am surrounded by friends who are children who are less than 13 years old, which is actually the age, which is clearly spelled out in the terms and conditions of Instagram and Facebook, that this is the minimum age to come there. And the parents are actually the ones opening the accounts for their children who are not at that age. So there is something also that we need to take into account in why this kind of the behavior is happening. This, I think, also element I was very interested in listening to, revealing the reality of this interest of the parents of having this discretion to decide. And this is something that is very difficult also for industry when assessing which could be the best or the most appropriate measures that could be in place. So in light of all of these challenges, and probably there are more, but I thought that this could be a good way for me to recap many ideas that have been said before and that I fully share, or that the company has also identified in the same way. Why this conference is so aptly named, because it seems that it's all about finding the balance, and I will add, in every context.
Thanks very much indeed for those opening remarks. I guess a worry that a lot of people will have is that big companies in particular could develop their own approach, their own systems, their own standards. And that will, first of all, make it more difficult for smaller companies, and also more confusing both for the parents and for the children. So I wondered what your view was about, I mean, everybody thinks, whether it's true or not, everybody thinks Facebook, because they're full of very smart people, are on the case and are thinking about this question. Every big company must be, and certainly Facebook must be. So I wonder what you think about the desirability of establishing industry-wide standards so that we can make it as easy as possible for parents and children to navigate these tricky questions, rather than, as it were, the risk otherwise is that you see different companies adopting different solutions, and that might work for individual companies, but it won't help in the space as a whole.
Definitely, John, you have pointed out something that is extremely important. I think every company, and Facebook is definitely not an exception, I would just say the opposite, is looking at what they can do with what they have, with respect to the resources that they have. And the resources, of course, of the companies are very different. One of the elements that are particularly powerful in Facebook is artificial intelligence, and therefore this is one of the elements on which Facebook has been and continues to invest in order to see how we may improve the estimation of age with the kind of signals that we may have. And this is, as Jennifer was saying, some of these technologies are still in its infancy, but definitely they are already very promising results with respect to the estimation of age for the under 18. This is one thing. Another element that I think we take into account is that we put a lot of emphasis in the age assurance for a very good reason. But as Professor Livingston was saying, and I think also Simone at the very beginning, it's just one tool among others. And we need in each context to identify which are all the other elements also that you have in mind with respect to the context, so the kind of content or conduct that could be creating the risk for children, and which are the kind of response that you may provide. And maybe it's not only age assurance. It could be, and it should be, I think, part of the elements. But there are elements regarding, in our case, the community standards, which are establishing rules of behaviors that are inappropriate or unacceptable. And these are enforced through, again, artificial intelligence combined with human review, combined with user reports. But this is also coupled with ad restrictions, so certain things that advertisers cannot do for any user. Even if we failed into the age assurance, things that are not going to happen, for example, nudity or pornography. again, enforced through AI with all the difficulties that this has, but this is another element. There are elements also related to privacy and safety settings. There are elements that are also safeguards that are implemented with respect to limiting the possibility of adults that are strangers to connect with young people, which I think was definitely another risk that was also raised or identified by other speakers. So when we see age assurance, we see age assurance as an element among a myriad, if I may use this expression, of different safeguards that you may apply in order to limit as much as you can the risk, because there is no business interest in having a bad experience, in addition to the liability, which in itself is sufficiently important. But also there is no business incentive if you are not in a safe environment, in general for adults, even more for children. And coming again to, I think, one of the elements of the questions, definitely one of the things that I think companies are also looking for is to try to avoid that there is that the experience of the user, also with respect to the frictions that you have, at least they can be understood, because otherwise, as we have been saying before, they could be frustrated, and therefore this is not going to work in any respect. And if they need to go to an age assurance process that is different in each and every company or in each and every site, also for governmental sites, this is definitely a very bad experience, we as citizens of the world, and definitely for our children as well. And this is why definitely Facebook is first involved in this project, because this is part of the element of a philosophy that we have of having a dialogue that is open with other members of the industry, and not only with the regulators, and as someone else has been mentioning as well, with the families. So parents and young people are also part of the consultation that we have, and that are an active also part. As I mentioned, one of the challenges is also the behavior that we as families are having with respect to our children, and our children as well, that are learning to behave in this digital environment. So definitely, I am more than in favor, let's say, to having this kind of cross-industry approach also, because each of us have limitations in the way we can approach things. In particular with respect to, so we can be very good in certain kind of information that we have, which maybe are not the best in order to identify whether a child is of 8 years old, because this is not how our platform is designed. Other providers may be much better than ourselves with respect to this information. I think that the opportunity will be to be able to see how we can do this in a maybe combined manner, or at least that we combine our superpowers that each of the organization may have.
That's great. We don't really have time for questions now, but there are some coming in, so we might refer back to you later. But as I said before, every question that came in will be answered in the blog. So muchas gracias, Cecilia.
Muchas gracias a vosotros.
See you later.